Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. It's really a privilege to be able to spend some time with everyone this morning and to enjoy a really great event with a lot of tradition. There are clearly very few organizations in our community and certainly across our country and the world that do more than the Red Cross and the American Red Cross. For us here in Long Beach, our partnership with all of you means so much to the security of our city, to ensure that people are safe, to make sure that we're prepared for emergencies, to take care of local families, and to most importantly, I think, create a sense of partnership with our neighborhoods and our community so that people feel like they live in a place where they're cared for and where there's going to be always a neighbor to support what they're doing. I know for most of everyone in this room, the amount of volunteer hours and advocacy that all of you do is incredibly commendable. And certainly on behalf of the whole city, I just want to thank you for contributing so much to an organization that in Long Beach and certainly the region we cannot do without. So thank you very much. Absolutely. And I, of course, want to personally congratulate all of the heroes that are being honored today for their bravery, for their volunteerism, for committing so much to our community. We cannot thank you enough. You really are doing God's work, and thank you. Thank you again for all of that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming again to this marvelous event. It is our signature event of the year. And as Bill says, if you don't leave here with a heart full of hope, please check your pulse, because this is a marvelous event, and these are some marvelous people. For those of you who have been with us since the very beginning of Heroes, some 11 years ago, you will notice that the cover of your program lists us not just as Greater Long Beach any longer, but we have been added to the incredible Greater Los Angeles region, which is the entire county of Los Angeles, Red Cross. And for those of you who don't know, we go all the way up to Inyo and Mono County, so if there's a fire in Big Bear or Mammoth, we're there. The name of our chapter is now, we are the American Red Cross serving Greater Long Beach, Rio Hondo, and the South Bay. So the volunteers that you see here not only cover our Greater Long Beach area, but we are also privileged to serve 44 cities that run from Redondo Beach all the way to the Orange County line and from the ocean out to La Habra Heights. So we consider that a validation of all the things that we're doing right. We're proud to be part of the Greater Los Angeles region, and we're proud to be part of the American Red Cross nationally. My board and my volunteers make it very easy for me to be a good leader. And also it's very easy when you have fabulous programs. In the middle of your table, you will find a home fire preparedness sheet. Matt will tell you more about this program later. But every 8 minutes, the Red Cross is called to a fire. And this year, we set the noble goal nationally that over the next 5 years, we will reduce the number of deaths and injuries to fire-related deaths in home fires. It's called the Home Fire Preparedness Campaign. And there are some things that you can do right away. Pick up that sheet that's in the middle of the table. It will tell you. And also tonight, if you didn't do it last week when the time changed, check the batteries on your smoke alarms. Talk to your family about how you would get out of your house in the event that you would smell smoke. And practice a plan on how to get out. And with that, you will be helping us, you'll be helping the Red Cross in reducing the number of deaths and injuries to fires.
We also couldn't do this without the generous support of all our sponsors who make this event possible and make our services to the community possible. The Red Cross thanks you for your generous contributions. The chapter thanks you, I thank you, but way more importantly, the people you help, they thank you for what you've done.
Our humanitarian level sponsors are those who contribute at a significant level, and they are Edison International, who has been a sponsor for our Hometown Heroes since the beginning, and we're represented by Miss Melissa Amador. Our second humanitarian sponsor is Tesoro Corporation, who have been a longtime sponsor of ours, and they are represented today by Mr. Kim Demi.
The first one, Grand Food and Beverage, represented by Jim Chura. Charter Communications, which is filming the ceremony for broadcast during April, the date to be posted on our website, redcrosslb.org, represented by Stephanie Gaines. Another response sponsor, Atkinson, Andelson, Loya, Rudd, and Romo, attorneys at law, represented by our Board of Directors member, Scott Dauscher, and who is also our chair for the event.
Our first preparedness sponsor is our Vice Chairman, member of Board of Directors, Mr. Paul Conrad, President of Total Western Incorporated. Our second preparedness sponsor is also a board member, although we haven't given him a name tag yet. That's how new a board member he is, Mr. Stephen O'Kane with AES Alamitos. One of our longest time supporters and one of the greatest gentlemen in the greater Long Beach area, Mr. Frank Coman of California Resources, is also a preparedness sponsor. California Water Services, represented by Ron Sorensen. We have Pasha, Stevedoring, and Terminals, represented by Braxton Craighill. And Price Transfer Incorporated, represented by Stephen Straub.
Okay, we also have some prevention sponsors. The first is Los Angeles County Supervisor and our very, very good friend Don Kanabe, represented by Aaron Steibel. And another prevention sponsor, the Port of Long Beach, represented by Dr. Noel Hasakaba.
We have two good neighbor sponsors, represented by Mitsubishi Cement, and if Mr. Bud Briggs is here. And our good friends at Dignity Health St. Mary Medical, represented by our also good friend Jake Heflin with the Long Beach Fire Department.
It is our pleasure to present a very special recognition for a Corporate Hero of the Year. Corporate Hero Award is given to a company that contributes substantial financial support to the Red Cross, actively participates in special events, and provides an excellent example of partnership in the community. We're proud, really proud, to present the 2015 award to TABC, that's Toyota Auto Body Corporation. TABC is selected as our 2015 Corporate Hero in recognition for all their ongoing support to our chapter. A representative from TABC has not only served on our board of directors for many, many years, but one of their members chaired our board at one time. TABC has consistently sponsored our annual Hometown Heroes since the inception in 2005. They host many blood drives at their location, were linchpin supporters of the annual golf tournament for more than 13 years, and provided much-needed funds for establishing key youth and young adult programs. This summer, TABC is generously donating both the funds and the location for an important community outreach event, Prepare North Long Beach. This event is designed to bring the message of preparedness, safety, resilience, and home fire prevention to one of the most vulnerable communities in our jurisdiction. This project will not only bring our message and training to those who need it, but volunteers will also be installing smoke alarms and helping residents make escape plans in their home in case of an emergency. At this time, I would like to welcome Jim Zamer to the stage to accept the award. Jim?
Okay, they did ask me to say a few words. I was expecting to go at the very end and make it very, very brief. Since I'm at the beginning, I'll make it even more brief. So first of all, Bill and Margaret, thank you very much for, on behalf of the Red Cross, recognizing TABC and Toyota. On behalf of everybody at TABC and Toyota, this is something that we're very honored and humbled to accept. We don't do what we do in the community to get awards. We do it really because it's the right thing to do. So, it's not every day you get a chance to have lunch with a bunch of heroes. Today, we all get that opportunity. We haven't met them yet, but they're out there amongst you in the crowd. It's also not every day that you get to work with people that are truly heroes in the community. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that through TABC and Toyota. And if people don't know, TABC is the oldest manufacturing Toyota plant in North America. We're located in North Long Beach, and we've been there for 43 years. Almost as many as I am old. Not quite. And I do happen to represent a fantastic management team that takes their roles in the community very seriously. A role where they not only represent TABC and Toyota on the board of an organization, but where they are actively involved in making a difference for those organizations. So some of my heroes at TABC are our plant president, Mike Buffon, who knows the importance of being relevant in the community. John Sukup, who supports the Boys and Girls Club. Don Rodriguez is here. John supports you guys pretty much. Jude Correa supports Children Today. Randy Miller, who's also here, supports Cal State Long Beach. Jim Eklund supports the Green Council of the Long Beach Chamber. Rhonda Gilliard supports CCEJ. I saw Braden here somewhere, so he knows what's going on. And Charles King, who is a board member for the Red Cross. So they all help us make a difference. So without them, we're not relevant in the community, and without them, we're not considered for this kind of recognition. So thanks to all of them, and thanks to all of you. Appreciate it.
One of the most fearsome predators, T-Rex fossils have been discovered across North America. Hey, babe.
So you were watching a show about dinosaurs and then you just decided to start digging? Yeah. Well, there you have it, a terrific discovery.
When you get over 200 crystal clear HD channels and live TV on the Spectrum app, you never know what you might discover. Charter Spectrum. Where will it take you?
When a child is born, it should be the happiest time in one's life. But for some, it's just too difficult to handle. Think before you do the unthinkable. There is an option. Don't abandon your baby.
Are you prepared in case of a natural disaster? Are basic necessities readily available from your home in case of no electricity or running water for days at a time? Preparation is the best defense against natural disasters. For more information and tips on how to prepare, contact your local Long Beach Red Cross.
It's my distinct pleasure to introduce that MC for the afternoon's program, Mr. Matt Kaplan. Matt is an award. We'll give him another one, all right? Matt is an award-winning media producer and radio host for Planetary Society in Pasadena. This society was founded in 1980 by some really famous people, Carl Sagan, Bruce Murray, and Louis Friedman. It was founded to inspire and involve the world's public in space exploration. I worked for TRW for 30 years. Space exploration is a very important thing to me, subject dear to my heart. Matt works with his boss, Bill Nye, the science guy, and many of the world's greatest scientists, writers, artists, and astronauts. He has an extensive background in journalism, which has ranged from public radio reporting, covering political conventions, to movie reviewers for an international magazine. Some of you may remember him as a correspondent for a pioneer national TV series about computers, or as a guest host of KPCC's Talk of the City. Matt has been the much-loved voice of Greater Long Beach Hometown Heroes programs every year except one. He was at that one year, he was a media representative at the installation of an incredible telescope in Chile. So we let him go, just that one year. Please join me in welcoming our good friend, Matt Kaplan.
Thank you, Bill and Margaret. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention also a 30-year, more than 30-year career at California State University, Long Beach. I'm officially retired, but still have a little thread that connects me to the university, so go Beach. You know, I look forward to this awe-inspiring celebration as much as anything else that I do all year. I am so proud to have been part of it right from the start a decade ago, and so grateful to the Red Cross for allowing me to share the stories of remarkable heroes with you. No doubt, you've already had them pointed out. You've seen the women wearing those vintage Red Cross uniforms from the World War II era, from the 1950s, the 1960s. These red carpet escorts for today's heroes are just a handful of our Red Cross nurse volunteers: Debbie Sutton, Hetty Niemeyer, Joni Levis, and Agnes de Leon. Please give them a hand. So we may have been at this for 10 years, but we know that a lot of you are new to Hometown Heroes. Other than their amazing and inspiring stories, you're about to learn that our heroes are all quite different except for one thing. Something inside pulled them forward to help someone else. In many cases, that person was a stranger. It's almost always something our heroes did without thinking or hesitating. You're going to hear many times today that these honorees don't think that they've done anything heroic. They usually believe they simply did what anyone else would do. Each hero's story is different, yet there is also a common theme that I think you'll notice. It's about reaching out and working together to help. And I think you're going to agree that these are wonderful human beings who took extraordinary action precisely when it was needed. Our first hero of the afternoon is Matthew Taylor. A family outing to the local Chick-fil-A is not supposed to be a life-threatening event, but for one family in Cerritos, that's what happened. And a tragedy was avoided thanks to the quick thinking and action of our first hero. High school senior Matthew Taylor works at the restaurant and was routinely going about his work when he noticed someone choking. Even as he rushed to the table, Matthew was trying to recall how to perform abdominal thrusts. He later told us, the whole time I was thinking, oh my God, do I remember how to do it? But I was also thinking, I can't make it any worse. Unsure, but certain that action was needed, he began applying the maneuver to the man as the man's pregnant wife and child looked on. Matthew said, I still remember her terrified face. Although helping was a snap reaction, Matthew was worried that he'd done something incorrectly. I hoped I hadn't screwed up. Later, I was in the back shaking, and the paramedics asked to talk to me. It was scary, but then they told me, thank you. He would have been dead by the time we got here. For Matthew, his actions were instinctive because his life prepared him for this moment. The main hero in my life, he said, is my mom, who adopted me as an infant. She is a very selfless person. Growing up, Matthew was also strongly influenced by Jeff Westrup, director of service at his high school. It didn't hurt that Matthew had been trained in CPR and had taken his recertification shortly before the incident. If you have the training, it helps, he says. It all depends on whether you're willing to step forward and do it. The restaurant was full. There were plenty of other people there to call 911. I could get to him faster than I could get to the phone, so I ran to help. Matt went on to say, "Don't be afraid. That's my advice to anyone. Freezing up could cause someone to die, and that is not what you want." Besides his daily work, Matthew plans to go to college and study jazz saxophone. For one fortunate family, Matthew's action was music to their ears. Please give a warm round of applause to Matt Taylor. Now, Matthew doesn't think of himself as a hero. In fact, he feels humbled by the experience. What if it were me in trouble and others didn't know what to do, he says. It makes you more aware, so you look out for things like that, and it made me want to pursue more training. So apparently it's a good day for Matts. Matt Bolin, our next hero, was camping overnight at Bolsa Chica State Beach. It was odd, he says. I was at Bolsa Chica that night so I could set up bright and early for my son's second birthday. I could have been asleep in the trailer, but I was outside having coffee when it all began. There was a commotion about 50 yards away, and I saw two people carrying a lifeless person out of the water. I ran down to the beach to help. Matt acted instinctively. He is a trained paramedic and firefighter with the Long Beach Fire Department. First, he identified himself and then quickly went to work. The man was not breathing, so Matt checked his pulse and started CPR. Along with the Good Samaritans who had pulled the man out of the water, other people rushed over to help, including an off-duty police helicopter pilot, an off-duty police sergeant, and a respiratory therapist. I didn't know the other guys who were helping, but we all came together and I really felt like I had a team with me. I was by no means by myself. After 3 minutes, the man began to cough up water. State beach personnel arrived with much-needed equipment and took over while Matt continued to assist. He used a suction device to extract more seawater from the victim's airway and then helped prepare an IV bag for the emergency crew. Placing the victim on a backboard and stabilizing his neck, they were ready for transport. Now, until that moment, Matt had been focused entirely on the man's chest, noticing nothing else about him. As the man was being prepared for transport, he was asked his name. Matt was astonished to realize he knew him. It was Barry, his best friend's father. They had known each other for years. Once I realized it was someone I cared about, I was overwhelmed with emotion and called my wife, who was a nurse at Long Beach Memorial, Matt said. She was instrumental in getting me back on track where I needed to be, which was in the back of the ambulance, continuing to care for Barry. Matt was with Barry right into the hospital where he called Barry's son to deliver the news. He remained until family arrived. Barry has fully recovered. My stars were aligned that day, says Barry. And so, placing the medal around Matt's neck today is a very grateful Barry Waters. On that fateful day at the beach, Matt recalled why he chose his life path. The opportunity to help people is pretty inspiring. It drives me to be as prepared as I possibly can. Providing the help people need on their worst day is great. Dan Whittington. Dan knows about physical training. He's a cross-country and track coach in Whittier. What he didn't know was that one day all of his training and experience would come into play to save the life of one of his students. A group of 50 students were doing sprints when one of them, Mason, passed out. He fell straight back, dropping to the ground like a falling tree, Whittington said. Now, Mason is not an ordinary athlete. Born with cerebral palsy, he overcame numerous difficulties to become an elite runner and was about to make the varsity team. Dan says, I ran to his side. Mason tried to get up, but immediately fell again and passed out. He began to convulse and stop breathing. I was there with one of the senior girls who was watching all of this unfold. I looked at her and said, you better start praying because I need to start CPR. Sending his assistant coach to call 911, Dan started administering cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Everything was moving in slow motion, he said. I was doing the chest compressions. I think I got about halfway through, 15 or 30 compressions, when Mason started coughing. But his heartbeat remained slow and weak. I could hear the sirens and was praying, get here soon, when Mason stopped breathing again. Dan continued CPR until arriving police officers took over. When paramedics arrived, they used the automatic external defibrillator, or AED, to give Mason 2 series of electric shocks, and then continued to perform CPR. When Dan contacted Mason's parents to tell them to get to the park immediately, he learned Mason had been staying with an older cousin while Mom and Dad were in Arizona. His parents immediately left for the airport. Dan and his assistant followed the ambulance to the hospital to await further news. The physician worked on Mason for 45 minutes. Finally, Mason's heart started beating on its own. Mason remained in intensive care for 3 weeks. But since then, he has been going to school every day. He's walking with guidance, but is often in a wheelchair because his vision hasn't fully recovered. Truthfully, as much as they found out about his heart, Dan said, they don't know how he was able to run the way he did. Doctors have cleared him for running again as soon as he gets his coordination and eyesight back. Here today to place the medal around Dan's neck is that student he saved, Mason Tejas. Mason is accompanied by his father. Dan told us it could have gone very differently. If I hadn't received Red Cross CPR training, I am so proud that I get to see Mason every day. Mason's mom told me that while he was still in intensive care, Mason told her no matter how he continues to live his life, each minute is a blessing. That puts things into perspective. Jimmy Chavez, Karen Cerda, Juan Lara, and Andrea Wooldridge. Teachers and their school colleagues are often called upon to do more than teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. In this case, they were called on to save a life. 7-year-old Kevin Sandoval was enjoying lunchtime with the rest of his schoolmates in the Norwalk-La Mirada Unified School District. After heading to a nearby water fountain, he didn't immediately return to the lunch table. Special education aides Jimmy Chavez and Juan Lara became concerned and scanned the area. They immediately saw Kevin pulling on another aide's apron and motioning to his throat in the universal sign of choking. That aide, Karen Cerda, had rushed to Kevin, even as she worked to ensure the other children remained calm. Jimmy and Juan instinctively sprang into action. Jimmy struck Kevin on his back several times in a first attempt to dislodge whatever was caught in his throat. Next, he performed abdominal thrusts. Some food came up. Juan checked Kevin's mouth and said there was still more stuck in there. Kevin was panicking, which made it more difficult for his rescuers to help him. It truly took a team to manage the situation. While Juan and Karen worked to keep other children away from the scene and other colleagues tried to calm Kevin, Jimmy continued to perform abdominal thrusts. Juan checked his mouth again. At last, their perseverance paid off when the remaining pieces of food were expelled. Jimmy had completed CPR and first aid training only a few months before this incident. He credits one of his teachers, Andrew Wooldridge, for urging his colleagues and him to get training. Jimmy has always felt that it was important to make a difference in kids' lives, especially kids with special needs. Even a little progress is something good, he said. I can help them achieve things by being a good role model. On this day, he and his colleagues made the biggest difference possible in the life of one child. And as you can see, hanging the medals on his heroes today is young Kevin Sandoval. Kevin is one lucky boy. Juan wasn't supposed to come in that day, but his plans changed, and there he was. Jimmy says, the crazy thing is, this happened the day before my transfer. I work at a different location now. If I hadn't been there, who knows what would have happened. It feels nice to help someone. Actually, it feels great, like you're on top of the world. So I ask you, is it any wonder that so many of us look forward to this day so greatly every year? Bye-bye, Kevin.
In the past year, millions of people around the world went through what no one should have to go through. Yet on the other side, they found hope.
The Red Cross came in when I needed them the most. There was a fire at my apartment. I'd stepped out to go to a neighbor's house, and when I came back, my apartment was ablaze. Not only did they help me get through the crisis, but they helped me feel whole again.
Every 8 minutes, the American Red Cross responds to a disaster across every region, in every community, bringing relief and comfort to the thousands of families affected by those tragedies. And it's all thanks to you. Your generosity is the only reason we can do what we do. And every dollar you give means our volunteers can provide more warmth, more shelter, more food, more comfort, more humanity. More help whenever and wherever it's needed. So thank you for helping the helpers. We could never do it without you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you for donating, because it helped a lot.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much.
Say thank you, girls.
You guys are wonderful, and I thank you. Thank you, for covering us in our time of need.
To all who give, to all who will, thank you.
Steve Atlee, Victoria Simmons, Alan Krugel, and Peter Bigler. Alan Krugel, Peter Bigler, and Don Barber were gathered at the Jonathan Club in Los Angeles for a fellow squash players' memorial service. They could not have known they would soon be catapulted into another life and death experience. After leaving the memorial, Don met staff members Victoria Simmons and Steve Atlee, who was on the Red Cross Regional Board of Directors in Los Angeles, and another club member for a game of squash. Don won the first game, but as soon as the second game began, he collapsed. Victoria saw him struggling to breathe, gasping, his eyes rolled back, and his face white as a sheet. She put him in a recovery position and ran to her office to tell the manager on duty to call an ambulance. Alan, the club's athletic director, and Peter, a member of the club's staff, rushed to help. Steve told us Don was lying diagonally on the court having a hard time breathing. It looked like he was choking or having a seizure. I pried open his mouth, but when I couldn't feel his pulse, I started doing chest compressions. It was scary, very surreal. You want to think it isn't happening, but as I looked at him, I knew it was. It may sound silly, but I remember hearing Red Cross on the radio saying, "Do something," instead of nothing at all. That was when I started to do chest compressions to the pace of the old Bee Gees tune, Staying Alive. When Victoria returned, Don had completely stopped breathing. His face was blue-gray, and they still couldn't detect a pulse. It was clear to me that this was not going in the right direction, she said. He wasn't getting oxygen. Victoria and Alan took over CPR from Steve. Knowing time was critical, they took turns with chest compressions and rescue breaths. Their actions produced no immediate results, so Peter raced to retrieve the club's automatic external defibrillator. Peter and Steve set up the AED. I never thought I'd have to use this on anyone, said Victoria. I'm still in disbelief that we had to. It was great hearing the automatic voice on the AED machine giving us instructions. Working with Steve, Peter put the pads on Don. The most terrifying moment was when the machine said, "No pulse detected, shock advised," because it was like he really is dead, said Victoria. The AED did its work and then advised applying a second shock. Everyone was shouting, "Come on, Don!" The second shock was administered. Alan and Victoria continued CPR and rescue breaths. Suddenly, Victoria felt like Don was trying to pull air from her mouth. It was the first sign that he had begun to breathe on his own again. I could feel him getting stronger and stronger, she said. A third AED diagnosis said no shock was necessary, which was a relief to everyone. The episode lasted about 15 minutes, but to the participants, it felt like an eternity. When the paramedics arrived and took over, they immediately gave Don an injection and applied an oxygen mask. They transported Don to Good Samaritan Hospital. Victoria rode along, staying with him until his family arrived. Fortunately, Don has recovered. He is back playing squash with his friends and is here to place the medals on our heroes today. Please join me in applauding the heroic acts of Steve Atlee, Victoria Simmons, Alan Krugel, and Peter Bigler. Victoria says to everyone, trust your instincts and don't be afraid. Doing something really is better than doing nothing at all. Have faith in what you're capable of. Steve, who took a refresher CPR course at a recent Red Cross meeting, said that the training is critical. I came back to my law office the next day and I wanted to know where our AED was. Training gives you the knowledge you need, and you never know when you'll need it. Rob McNulty, Gary Golding, Hillary Swanson, and Kevin Cotter. Rob McNulty was with his children at Abalone Cove in beautiful Palos Verdes. Friends Hillary Swanson, Gary Golding, and Kevin Cotter were also there. The day was beautiful, but ocean conditions were dangerous. A teenager, not realizing how hazardous the surf was, jumped into the water and was almost immediately in trouble. The waves and current sucked him into a cave over and over. Gary tried to pull the teen out of the water, but the strength of the waves quickly dragged Gary into the cave as well. Now, Gary is an experienced swimmer. He knew he needed to relax his body. Finally managing to escape the cave, he swam out past the waves to the jetty and climbed exhausted onto the rocks. Hillary was standing on the beach, directing would-be rescuers as the teenager popped up several times. Kevin jumped in another attempt at a rescue, but soon found himself in trouble and also had to be pulled out. Taking advantage of a momentary lull in the ferocity of the waves, Rob jumped in. His young children fearfully watched his every move. Rob grabbed the victim and managed to pull him out onto the rocks. Those rocks were razor sharp, he said. We were getting banged up pretty bad. The boy's head was hitting them repeatedly. He was definitely dead when I pulled him out of the water. I started to administer CPR. That went on for a couple of minutes, but every time I pumped water out, another wave would barrel on top of us and pour more water down his throat. Gary was able to catch his breath and crawled over to me. I said, we've got to get him to higher ground. We carried him further up the rocks. and Gary put him on a ledge. The whole time, we're still getting hit by waves because the tide was rising. They managed to drag the boy even a bit further, but Rob still thought he was dead. He told Gary, he's gone, man, it's over. Gary looked at Rob and said, we're not going to let this kid die. Gary started administering chest compressions while Rob performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. The waves were still coming up pretty high, so they had to move him again. Rob was holding his head above the waves, giving him rescue breaths, and Gary kept doing the chest compressions. That's when lifeguards managed to swim from their boat to the rocks. Just when they were about to give up hope, the young man amazingly started to regain consciousness. Gary and Rob helped the lifeguards load him onto a sheriff's helicopter to transport him to a nearby hospital. We were helping the kid into the basket, and right before he was lifted, he kind of stood on his own. We thought that was a really good sign. Then we jumped off the rocks and swam out to the lifeguard's boat. They decided to go to the hospital where they met his entire family. Ironically, one of the boy's uncles was a doctor at the hospital. Gary said the doctor told us if Rob had not pulled him out of the water and if we had not administered CPR, he would definitely have died. Despite his harrowing ordeal, the young man survived and is in good health. He is attending college and plans to become a doctor. Please join me in applauding the heroic acts of Rob McNulty, Gary Golding, Hillary Swanson, and Kevin Cotter. Timing is everything, Hillary told us. When Rob dove into the water to grab the victim and pull him out, it was the most perfect timing. Angels must have been watching over us because as soon as he dove, the swell stopped for a moment. It was enough time for Rob to dive in and grab him. As soon as he picked him up out of the water, a huge new set of waves swelled in. Rob advises, seize each day, live in the moment, and have gratitude. Persistence is one word that clearly describes Judy Clark. Her persistence and caring efforts were vital to preventing a tragedy. After returning home to Long Beach from an out-of-town trip, Judy noticed a message on her answering machine from the school that she had taught at before retiring. The message asked if Judy had heard from another teacher whom she knew well. The school had been trying to reach the teacher and had received no response for several days. When she called the school back, Judy learned they had still not heard from her friend. Judy could have left matters there and let the school follow through, but that's not Judy. She went to her colleague's nearby home and saw that her car was in the driveway. Knocking on the front door, she heard a faint response, "What do you want?" "It's me," Judy said. "You didn't call into school today." "I'm okay," said the response. Judy wasn't convinced. "Why don't you come to the door?" I'm coming, was the reply. Judy waited. When no one came to the door, Judy knocked again. I'm coming, was once again the reply. Still, no one appeared. Judy waited yet again for what seemed like an awfully long time. Finally, she shouted, "If you don't answer the door, I'm going to find an open window and come in." No reply. Thinking she might motivate her friend with fear, Judy said, "If you don't let me see you're all right, I'm going to call 911. I'm coming, came the reply once again from within. Well, it sounds like her regular voice, Judy thought. Should I leave and check back later? And then something inside me said, no, do something stupid. Going to the back door, Judy tried to unscrew the window screen using tools from her car. Just as she was about to break the window, a school staff person arrived and helped her. Fortunately, the house keys were on the counter next to that window. They opened the back door and entered the house. Things were definitely not as they should be. Their colleague was sitting in her living room chair. Her legs were swollen. She was disoriented and couldn't move. They immediately called 911. The hospital later told Judy that her friend was septic. She probably would have died sitting in that chair if they had not forced their way into the house. Persistence and caring. They saved a life that day. Please join me in a warm round of applause for Judy Clark. Thank you. Judy says, I don't think of myself as being a hero. I would do it again. The thing is, it's that moment of choice. If I hadn't stayed, I would have felt guilty. I suppose it makes me feel good that I made the right choice. Andrew Franco. So here's some news you're all waiting for. Southern California freeway accidents happen all the time. 16-year-old Andrew Franco lives near the 710 freeway in Long Beach. He's very familiar with the sounds of traffic moving smoothly, also the occasional fender bender, and sometimes sirens. A car accident is unfortunately also a familiar sound for Andrew. In fact, less than 2 weeks before this incident, he had called 911 for assistance after hearing a crash. And then there was this night when the sounds he heard propelled him to act even more quickly and more personally. It was late, and Andrew was watching television when his relaxed evening was interrupted by the sound of a car's tires screeching. This was followed by a tremendous crash. From his window, he could see an overturned vehicle. The car had crashed through a guardrail and plunged down a 50-foot embankment toward the residential neighborhood where Andrew lives. The vehicle was still overturned when it came to a stop. The fire department later said the driver was very lucky. A tree had stopped her descent. Pausing only long enough to grab a pocket knife, which has a tool for breaking glass, Andrew ran outside and down the street to offer assistance. When he got to the scene of the crash, he saw a young woman trapped inside. She was alert, but in pain. She managed to respond to Andrew's instructions to turn off the car's engine. He told her he was going to break the car window. As he had expected, his pocket knife was a valuable and effective tool. With the window broken, he managed to pull the woman out of the car and carry her to safety. A neighbor had called 911. Andrew stayed with the woman till help arrived, and an ambulance transported her to the hospital. His actions don't strike Andrew as heroic. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. I'm happy I could help her. Does he think others can learn something from his story? Yes, he hopes people will help one another by not hesitating when there's an emergency. As for his future plans, Andrew wants to join a proud group that is dedicated to service. The Marine Corps seems a perfect fit for a modest hero. Please give your warm applause to Andrew Franco. Danny Gutierrez and Rosalind Delatorre. Saving someone's life often depends on unforeseen circumstances, like the day Danny Gutierrez and Rosalind Delatorre were running late for work in Cerritos. Danny was just arriving that morning when he saw a commotion. There was a man lying on the office driveway, and he was obviously in distress. Two girls were shaking him as though trying to wake him up, as 10 stunned bystanders seemed frozen in fear. Danny immediately recognized the man. He had frequently seen him doing his daily exercise routine by walking energetically around the neighborhood. Danny jumped out of his car to help. He checked the man's vital signs first. I felt for his pulse, but there wasn't any. He was gasping for air. I decided I needed to start chest compressions and began CPR. Even then, no one else jumped in immediately to help. I continued to pump his chest for several minutes. All the time I was thinking about his family. As I was trying to wake him, he started foaming, so I knew it was pretty bad. And I was becoming exhausted. Now, anyone who has done CPR knows that it is a grueling process. It takes a lot of effort to push the ribs down as you attempt to simulate the heart. He still hasn't fully recovered, obviously. Several minutes later, Rosalind arrived. She could see Danny was wearing out. Thank God, because I was running late that day. I happened to be wearing pants and flat shoes. Normally, I wear 6-inch heels. I jumped out of the car and ran over to help Danny. Now, Danny's a big guy. He was working so hard on this man that he was sweating. He said, "We need a nurse. We really need a nurse. Help me." Rosalind took over and continued the CPR until the paramedics came. Danny and Rosalind held hands and prayed while the paramedics worked on the man. The paramedics worked feverishly until they got a pulse. Just before they wheeled him into the ambulance, they started an IV. Danny and Rosalind looked at each other and said, "That's a good sign, isn't it? They wouldn't be giving him an IV if he was dead, would they?" One of the paramedics asked them who started the CPR. "Danny and I both raised our hands," said Rosalind. The paramedic said, "He's alive because of you." They looked at each other and burst into tears of joy. They were exhausted and emotionally drained, but the ordeal wasn't quite over yet. Because the victim didn't have any ID, he went to Lakewood Hospital as a John Doe. Danny and Rosalind left their phone numbers with the paramedics and visited him during their lunch break. His family had not yet been located. It wasn't till 5 that evening that they received a phone call from the man's wife. She thanked him for their efforts, and they were finally able to relax. The act of saving a life often creates a bond between victim and rescuer, and that's what happened here. Rosalind visited the man's home 2 months later and was delighted to find him well. She spontaneously hugged him. He had no recollection of the event at all, so Rosalind filled him in. And placing the medals on our heroes today is that extremely grateful man they saved, Mr. Elbert Kelly. The experience further energized Rosalind, who decided to work with LA County to promote the PulsePoint app. It's an innovative new smartphone application that lets citizens trained in CPR know when their help is needed, allowing them to step in during those very critical moments before paramedics arrive. Preparation and an act of kindness could be the difference between life and death for so many. "I want to encourage people to be trained," said Rosalind. Danny added, "Life is beautiful. Everyone should be able to enjoy it, and I am so glad to have had a part in giving that chance to someone else." Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in one more round of applause for all of